think the only thing I would add, and I'm an amateur on this topic, but I think in northern Iraq they probably would say they'd like to be independent, but it's simply not. They have almost independence in the current situation, and pushing for the next little increment of it, full sovereignty, I think they know is not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we do have some evidence that from northern Iraq, that if you ask Kurds, would you like to have an independent state, they do say overwhelmingly yes. And they have most of the features of it right now, including flag, language, things that are attributes of national identity. And so that's the only slight change I would make.
I think actually Turkey benefits from Turkey can have a lot of influence in northern Iraq, and perhaps even more influence than Baghdad has. I mean, so it has almost a virtual protectorate without.
It's a very smart policy they've adopted toward the
absolutely.
northern Iraq.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Please, in front row.
My question related to this one, the Kurdish question, what's the significant role may play this conflict in the area? Is it really better off once for all solve the Kurdish question, not just going this way? I mean, there's a big question out there, why the United States always trying to sacrifice the Kurds to a third party?
Well, I can answer the first part of that question. I think Turkey knows that in order to play a leading role in the region, it really has to solve its own conflicts. When Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu was here in Washington, D.C., and he talked about how they pursued a foreign policy beyond identity. They said, we're part of the East, we're part of the West, we're part of Asia, part of Europe, part of Middle East. And my question was that how can we talk about a foreign policy that does not have an identity angle when we cannot even define ourselves? So we have a Kurdish problem, and that's weakening, I think, Turkey's hand in the region. And I think that was one of the many reasons why the current government initiated the Kurdish opening. And unfortunately, it wasn't handled well. And the process is in a deadlock at the moment. But yes, I completely agree that solving the Kurdish problem is Turkey's number one priority. It should be its number one priority. And now that the PKK attacks has increased in the last months, and I think it's going to be very difficult for Turkey to go forward with the Kurdish opening. So I think that's why they're trying to they're following a two-track approach. On the one hand, they're trying to deal with the terrorism problem, and on the other hand, they really would like to move forward with the Kurdish opening. And they're in the process of drafting a new constitution. And of course, the Kurdish issue will have to be addressed in that constitution. But I think it's a very complicated, Turkey is in a very difficult situation domestically now.
Last couple of questions. Why don't we take two questions, and these two gentlemen here. So,
I think after the elections in Egypt and in Tunisia, that kind of 40 months, I assume that there will be something like an Islamic or Muslim political parties bloc that will deal with the ruling party in Turkey to see an evolving, emerging, unified foreign policy to this Islamic bloc in the region. So how my question to that, and how do you see such a future cooperation between these parties?
thank you.
And how this really plays?
Why don't we take your question, please?
Thank you. I'm more than intimidated by this Chris Noble, retired Navy captain, but my most recent posting before that was advisor to Papa Miles about Northern Iraq. I was in a room just to amplify your remarks about domestic policy. Early 2008, Barzani and Papa Miles were having intense discussion about who I thought was a new leader by the name of Iraq. And my Arabic still quite poor. I'm learning, but it's getting better, and Kurdish is even worse. So it was going long, and then finally I had to ask, who is this person? And they explained. And I was terribly embarrassed because I'm American. I didn't know who it was. And then they said, well, for you, elections are best an inconvenience and a change of direction. For us, they liked it there. So they had a far greater perspective on our elections than even like in Al-Khwarizmi, again, and he's still currently the chief of defense of Iraq. His famous comparison was the Talibani Barzani Pujol set up. And that, he felt, was the solution to this whole thing. It was very simplistic, very sophomoric. The words respect and forgiveness went an awfully long way. He said we'll be wrong 5% of the time, but the rest of us don't, but we go after 5%. Thank you.
Okay, so why don't we invite, Bill, you want to go first, and just any final comments, either stimulated by these last two questions or more broadly?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to our colleague from Al-Ahram. I think you're getting a little bit ahead of where events are today and are likely to be in the next few months. I mean, we don't know how well the Nahda party or the Ikhwan will do, or whatever the new party will do in Egypt. But I would be very, very surprised if we see Tunisia move sharply in the direction of having a foreign policy that is primarily dictated by the Nahda party. Yes, there will be more influence over Tunisian politics by the Islamist current, but I don't expect it to be as dramatic as you made it sound, where there will be a move toward a new bloc approach. And as far as I can tell, with all due respect to your military leaders in Egypt, they're not about to give up control for the next year or so. Even if the Islamists do reasonably well in the next elections, executive power is still going to be in the hands of the military for the coming year. So we'll see how all this plays out. But I think the idea that we're on the verge of seeing a deep shift toward a kind of new alignment of a kind of Tunisia, Egypt, maybe Libya, and Turkey as a kind of moderate Islamist bloc is a little premature. Nationalism still counts. National interests still count. On certain issues, of course, there will be similar resonances. I think all of these countries are already on record as supporting the Palestinians, Palestinian statehood, and that will be an even stronger theme with Mubarak gone, with Ben Ali gone, and so forth. So yes, things of that sort we're going to see, but that's not exactly radically new. I mean, even the old Egypt was, in favor of a Palestinian state. So on what issue might they really come together? Iran, possibly, they will have similar suspicions of Iran's influence, but for a country like Tunisia, that's very far away and not very important. So I don't know. My guess is that there are a lot of things that will be sorted out, but the idea that we're going to see Egypt and Turkey in a tight alliance, I think it's going to be much looser than that. I think Egypt will always have its own sense of rivalry with Turkey. It is, after all, an Arab state. It wants to be the dominant power in the Arab sphere, and it will be jostling up against both Iran and Turkey as regional powers that also want to be influential in that region. So, if you look a little further down the road and you get through this particular moment when Islamists look like they're on a roll, I suspect you're going to come back to geostrategic interests being more important than ideology.